I'm exhausted. Late at night, I trudged home with a body that felt utterly drained. Work had kept me at the office far later than I'd planned. Feeling guilty about coming home so late to Chris, my husband, and Roy, my father-in-law, who lived with us, I quickened my pace. Suddenly, I stopped in front of my house. The garage door was open. Before I could even question why, the car parked inside the garage sped out abruptly. Startled, I let out a small scream, and instinctively shrank back. The car screeched to a sudden halt right in front of me. Roy, gripping the steering wheel in the driver's seat, noticed me and quickly swung open the passenger door from the inside. "Hannah, get in the car." "What? Wait, what's going on? Why at this hour?" "Stop asking questions. I'll explain later. Just get in now." His urgency left no room for hesitation, so I swiftly opened the passenger door and climbed into the car. Before I could even lock my seat belt, Rye floored the accelerator, and another small scream, escaped my lips. As the car sped off, I heard shouting from behind us. I turned to see Chris yelling incomprehensibly. He seemed to be chasing after the speeding car, desperately trying to catch up with us. "What is going on here?" Behind us, Chris's face contorted into a devilish expression, while Roy maintained a stoic look, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Sandwiched between the two, I could do nothing but sit in fear, my face twisted in confusion and anxiety. "My name is Hannah. I work as a tutor at a learning center near the station while living with my husband, Chris. We both work at the same place, but Chris is a full-time employee, while I work part-time. I handle most of the household chores, and Chris helps out without complaint if I ask him." Chris has a handsome face. Sometimes, he looks at me with those drooping eyes and a slight smirk at the corner of his lips. While washing dishes, I'd often catch him smiling softly at me, and I couldn't help but chuckle. "What? Why are you staring at me?" "Your hairstyle. The way you tie your hair at the back. It's beautiful." Startled, I almost dropped the dish I was washing. Chris is always like this. He compliments me in moments when I least expect it, focusing on things I never even notice about myself. It's obviously flattery, but it still makes me happy. He's kind, maybe too kind. As coworkers at the same learning center, Chris is technically my superior. If the children's grades improve under my instruction, it reflects well on me. If they don't, I'm expected to implement better strategies. Even when I make mistakes in preparing reports or lesson plans, Chris never scolds me. He always offers guidance and support to others. He's the perfect kind and wonderful husband, and I think so too. Yet, a strange sense of unease lingers in my heart, nagging at me. Am I a terrible person for not fully trusting someone as kind as Chris? Chris and I met at our current workplace. When we first met, I remember feeling nothing special, but the reason we ended up marrying was probably because we shared certain similarities. That was long ago. My parents passed away in a car accident. It happened when I was in 5th grade, during a family trip to a resort. I gazed out the car window at the unfamiliar rural scenery passing by. Suddenly, Dad shouted, "Watch out! No, stop!" as Mom pulled me close with a desperate cry. A car with an epileptic driver crashed into ours, causing an accident that made the news. Dad and Mom didn't survive. I escaped with only minor fractures in my arms and legs. Relatives and friends who came to see me at the hospital kept calling my injuries a miracle or saying "I'm glad you're safe," as if I was lucky. Looking at my bandaged limbs, I asked myself if this was really a miracle, if this was truly fortunate. One of my relatives, with tears in their eyes, said this to me. Your mom. She passed away while trying to protect you. You have to live for her sake. This can't be true. It's all a dream. Everything is fake. Yes, it's confusing right now, but it'll be okay. It really will be okay. I pressed my bandaged hand against the hospital bed rail to confirm the pain. It wasn't fake, it was real pain. The tears wouldn't stop. I grieved for my parents' death, and I grieved for being the one who survived. Even so, with the unwavering support of my kind relatives, I grew up. I believe I received so much love. I told myself constantly that I had to become a reliable adult. That was always my resolve. From then on, I devoted myself wholeheartedly to work. I met Chris, a colleague, and gradually began to notice his strong work ethic, his dedication to students, his earnest and sincere attitude. He was kind to everyone and had striking features, making me think he was out of my league and not someone I could consider romantically. Our first date was Chris's idea. Then the second, and the third he always asked me out. It was I who asked him to be in a relationship. After our third date, I couldn't hold back my feelings for him any longer. When I confessed, Chris hesitated briefly before opening up about his past. I lost my mom. I live with my aging dad. And recently, I got divorced. I see. I've been burying myself in work to forget about the divorce. Knowing I'm a divorced man, wouldn't that make you hesitate to date me? I don't mind. I like you because of how dedicated you are to your work. Chris looked slightly surprised, but then gave me a gentle smile. As our relationship grew longer, our bond grew deeper. Just before I turned 40, Chris proposed to me. It was at a high-rise restaurant overlooking the ocean at night, dimly lit for a romantic atmosphere. The setting seemed tailor-made for a proposal, and with a serious face, he asked me, "Will you marry me?" At that moment, I felt as if I had become the protagonist of a drama. Losing my parents, feeling hopeless, and thinking the world was nothing but a lie. Back then, it finally felt like the view in front of me had become real. Chris began sharing more about his family, which he hadn't done much before. He told me about his late mother, Mary, and about living with his aging father, Roy. After we got married, he suggested we live together with Roy since he worried about him. I agreed without hesitation. Both Roy and Chris were kind, and I was living a satisfying life. We decided not to have children. Chris and I, knowing the pain and sorrow of losing parents, were afraid of becoming parents ourselves. I had accepted that this way of life was also valid. A few years into our marriage, Chris was incredibly kind. He accepted nearly all my suggestions and laughed off any mistakes I made with the housework. He laughed, then quickly turned away from me, gazing into the distance. His kindness, which I once admired, gradually began to feel different to me. I started to see it as indifference. Moreover, Chris was someone who rarely spoke about himself. As a tutor, his job seemed fulfilling yet incredibly demanding. His return times were inconsistent, and on weekends, he would often isolate himself in his study. His behavior was unpredictable, suddenly inviting me shopping or worrying about Roy's condition without apparent reason. I once heard the phrase, "Those who cheat often have an air of leisure." I don't remember where I heard it, but Chris's calm demeanor always made me wonder. He was naturally good-looking, and I knew he attracted attention, but infidelity that I could never forgive. With a mix of doubt and the hope to clear Chris's name, I decided to hire a private investigator. I was told the investigation would take a week. Although the service was shockingly expensive, I thought, if this proves Chris's innocence, I can wholeheartedly believe in his kindness again. When I returned home from the agency, I found Roy sitting in a chair, clutching his chest. "Roy," I rushed over, rubbing his back while handing him his medication and some water. Roy had a heart condition and was prescribed multiple medications. Given his age, he was also on various treatments to manage his blood pressure and cholesterol. I wasn't told much about his condition, but his medications seemed more about slowing the disease's progression than curing it. "Thank you. I'll feel better in a moment." While Roy usually lived like anyone else, the sudden episodes were challenging. They ranged from chest pain and breathing issues to muscle spasms. Most subsides with rest, but in severe cases, they could become dangerous. Recently, Roy's health had worsened. I tried to stay near him, observing his condition closely. I wanted to consult Chris, but he didn't come home even late at night. When I called, his only reply was always, "I'm busy, sorry." I worked with him and understood his workload, but still, he had volunteered to care for Roy. This felt unfair. I pouted as I organized Roy's numerous bills into a case. Something felt off about all this. A week later, I sat in the cramped office of the private investigator. Seated on a well-worn sofa, I listened to the findings. The conclusion was clear. Chris was guilty. He was in a relationship with a woman named Tracy. Tracy, that name was unfamiliar. Staring at the photos of her profile, likely taken in secret, I felt a deep gloom settle over me. "Divorce? Huh," I muttered as if the matter concerned someone else. Having lost my parents and grown used to solitude, I realized my fleeting happiness had come to an end. I let out a faint, bitter laugh. Returning home, I placed the documents from the investigation agency on an unused shelf in the chest. I put the kettle on the stove and began preparing my favorite herbal tea. As I poured hot water into the glass pot, the sweet, honey-like scent of linden filled the room. "Smells good, Hannah." Roy emerged from the room, smiling gently while lightly favoring one leg. I immediately supported him and helped him to the sofa in the living room. When I handed him the TV remote, he quietly shook his head. So I made 2 cups of the herbal tea and knelt on the floor beside him. "This is delicious. I feel like I'll sleep well tonight." "How are you feeling, Roy?" "Some days are better than others. But what about you, Hannah? Taking care of me hasn't been too much, has it?" "Well, I guess it's hard to say that kind of thing to my face," Roy added with a chuckle. That smile reminded me of Chris when we first met. That may be why. Before I knew it, I found myself telling Roy about hiring the investigation agency to look into Chris. How I couldn't forgive Chris. That I was considering confronting him and, depending on his response, filing for divorce. I'd even prepared the paperwork. Roy listened intently, his expression serious. And I regretted it the moment I noticed. This was a marital issue, not something to burden Roy, who was already struggling with his health. "Thank you for telling me." I tilted my head, unsure of what he meant by thank you. Feeling awkward, I took my cup of tea and retreated to the kitchen. When I glanced back, I saw Roy staring silently into the distance, his face troubled. After that, I hesitated to confront Chris about the affair. If we divorced, our life would fall apart. Having experienced the upheaval of a sudden lifestyle change after a car accident, I had grown to fear change. I believed in the happiness of today being the same as yesterday, and tomorrow following the same pattern, even if that life was built on a foundation of false love. One day, as I struggled to balance work and caring for Roy, an issue arose with a student at the tutoring center. A parent complained that their child's grades were dropping under the usual methods, forcing me to come up with a concrete plan to address it. Expecting a long night of work, I asked Chris to leave work early and take care of Roy. Late at night, I trudged home, exhausted. It had taken longer than expected, but I finally managed to draft a new study schedule. Feeling guilty for being late, I hurried toward the house. I froze in my tracks as I reached the driveway. The garage door was open. Before I could process why, the car parked inside suddenly sped out. I let out a small yelp. Shrinking back instinctively, the car screeched to a halt, and a voice shouted from the driver's seat, "Hannah, get in the car." What? Wait, what's going on? At this hour, don't argue. I'll explain later, just get in. Pressed by the urgency in his voice, I quickly opened a passenger door and got in. Before I could fasten my seat belt, the car sped off again, and I let out another small scream. Behind us, a voice shouted into the night. When I turned around, Chris was letting out an incoherent shout. It sounded like he was chasing after the car, desperately running to catch up. But as the car turned a corner, he disappeared from view. With that volume, his voice must have echoed through the entire neighborhood in the middle of the night. I sank deeply into my seat and let out a sigh. I had never seen Chris, usually so calm and composed, lose his temper like that. Roy, in the driver's seat, said nothing. It was likely something serious. I didn't know what had happened, but I decided to wait for Roy to explain. For a while, we simply drove down the road. There didn't seem to be any particular destination, just the motion of the car, until we finally stopped at a convenience store with a large parking lot. Roy rested his forehead against the steering wheel and exhaled deeply. "Roy, what happened?" Chris looked so angry. I'm sorry for the confusion." "Well, where should I start?" Roy tapped the steering wheel with his forehead several times, as if trying to organize his thoughts. Sensing the mood, I said, "I'll go get us some drinks." I bought drinks from the convenience store and handed one to Roy. "Thanks, Hannah. This might take a while. It's a story from the past. Are you willing to listen?" With that preface, Roy began his story. Yes, I suppose I should start with my wife, Mary, Chris's mom." I tilted my head in surprise. It was unexpected that this commotion would have anything to do with Mary, who had already passed away. Chris's mother, Mary, was described as someone who fell in love easily. Apparently, in her youth, she had relationships with several men at the same time. You'd think I should have divorced someone like that, wouldn't you, Hannah? But by then, we already had little Chris. When I thought about that, I just couldn't make the decision to leave. I felt like I could understand that a little. That's probably why, when Chris's affair came to light, I couldn't immediately demand a divorce. The fear of losing a family. Marriage isn't just a connection between two people. The thought of losing Roy's friends, who had been so kind to me, or even Roy himself, made it hard for me to move forward. But Mary was not an irresponsible woman. That might have been her only virtue. Mary, Roy explained, made time for each of the men she was seeing, and faced them earnestly. She didn't push the burden of housework or child care onto Roy. Together, they fulfilled their roles as parents and spouses, while Mary used her free time, what an average woman might spend on hobbies with other men. She also considered Chris's development and never revealed the truth to him. At that moment, Roy let out a slight chuckle, staring at the bright lights of the convenience store ahead. She used to say it was a very clean kind of polyamory, like it was her motto. Roy admitted that he had accepted Mary's lifestyle. He said he had no choice. It didn't feel good, but as long as he pretended not to see it, he realized it had little impact on his life. But their time as a family would come to an end far too soon. Mary was diagnosed with a brain tumor at a young age. Even when told she didn't have much time left, Mary, he said, remained unfazed. Before her condition worsened, Mary spoke to each of her partners about her illness and said goodbye. And in the end, Roy let go of the steering wheel and gently gazed at his open palm. In the end, she passed away in the hospital, holding Roy's hand. But I couldn't let myself stay down. For Mary's sake, I worked hard to raise Chris properly. However, things began to take a bad turn when Chris entered high school. Chris grew into a man with an insatiable love for women. Unlike Mary, he inherited only her tendency to fall in love quickly, a disastrous trait. With a gentlemanly demeanor, he would charm women, only to abandon them irresponsibly once he lost interest. Roy tried to put a stop to this behavior by having earnest conversations with him, but in the end, Chris's bad habits never changed, and he got married to me. At first, I was against the marriage. You understand, right? It was obvious that you would end up unhappy. But Chris, as a condition for marriage, Chris proposed living together with his father. For Roy, who struggled with mobility, it was an appealing idea. But in reality, most of Roy's care fell to me. On the surface, Chris appeared caring, but he spent his time partying. Even with a busy work schedule, he still found time to cheat. It's practically an illness. At first, he said things like, "I'll quit fooling around and focus on our marriage." But behind closed doors, he was living it up. In the end, people don't change easily. Hannah, when you shared the investigator's findings with me, I was grateful. I knew it was time to set things straight and reprimand him properly. This is such a strange story. Oh, yay, it is. Chris is flawed. I need to confront him properly as his father. I looked down slightly. A strange story. But not just about Chris. Mary, too, and even Rye seemed odd to me. Mary, who carried on her affairs with confidence. Roy, who had an unusual love that kept forgiving her. Very clean multiple dating. Roy spoke of Mary's multiple relationships as though they were something to be proud of, and I found it somewhat pitiable. By the way, why did you take me out all of a sudden? Chris seemed pretty angry. When you got home earlier, Chris was chatting happily with one of his lovers on the phone. I thought it would be too painful for you to witness that directly. Apparently, Rye got angry, snatched Chris's phone, and smashed it on the floor. That's why Chris chased after us. But wait a second. I already knew from the investigator's report that Chris was cheating. At this point, hearing him talking to another woman on the phone doesn't bother me. Are you feeling a bit calmer now? Yes, I feel calmer. I see. Maybe Roy was angry for my sake, but perhaps he was also angry for himself. Anger toward Mary, who was gone. An anger with no place to go. Redirected at Chris. Roy probably wasn't even aware of it. To be betrayed by someone, and then justify it, with no one left to blame. The engine started, and the car began to move. When I got home, I decided to confront Chris about his infidelity after discussing it with Roy. I parked the car in the garage. Chris, silently drinking whiskey in the living room, glared at Roy and me with resentment. Without a word, I placed the investigation report from the agency on the table. Chris, slightly drunk, rubbed his eyes as he skimmed through the documents. This is from my college junior. It's not like that. That's a weak excuse. The photos and the investigation report clearly prove otherwise. It's true. She said she was struggling with work and needed a calm place to talk. Just the two of us. Chris made a feeble attempt to explain himself. It was rare for him to look so flustered and out of control. I used to admire Chris for his hard-working nature and the kind smile he always showed me. Now, looking at him, it felt as though his facade had completely cracked. My feelings for Chris quickly turned cold, and his desperate excuses, whether valid or not, began to seem utterly irrelevant. Enough, Chris. Pay Hannah her settlement and agree to the divorce. This is between my wife and me, Dad. Stay out of it. I'm your father. I have every right to step in. Chris, caught off guard, eventually turned his gaze to me and gave a faint smile. My cold, detached eyes must have told him everything, that I had no love left for him. To be honest, I wasn't strongly inclined to get a divorce. The procedures, the changes to records, it all seemed so tedious. But if I didn't take a step forward now, I would remain miserable forever, living a life where my husband cheated on me, pretending not to notice while suffering in silence. Roy had lived that way, and while I didn't entirely disapprove of his choice, it felt wrong for me. I couldn't claim to know what an ideal marriage looked like, but a relationship where one person suffered silently while carrying sadness and heartbreak, that felt fundamentally wrong to me. Chris, we're getting divorced now. Wait, Hannah, I get it. I'll change. I won't cheat again. I'll only look at you, please. I no longer have any intention of looking at you. With those words, Chris fell silent, and the night quietly passed. A year went by. Chris surprisingly agreed to the divorce without much resistance. Ever the frivolous man, he still sent me messages like, "How are you?" or "Shall we go on a date?" I couldn't tell if he was joking or serious, but I ignored him completely. Today was a sunny day. The rainy season had ended, leaving a clear blue sky. I looked at myself in the mirror of the restroom, wearing a white dress that seemed too youthful for my age. I still felt young. I still felt beautiful. The words Chris often said to me might have been lies, but this feeling I held was undeniably real. My phone vibrated in my bag. When I answered, a familiar voice greeted me. "Is that you, Hannah? It's been a while." The caller was Roy, who, without prompting, began to share updates about Chris's situation. After the divorce, Chris suddenly became quiet and avoided dating women. It seems he hasn't found a new partner yet, but he has started taking things seriously, like caring for Roy and seeking a new relationship. Everything is moving in a good direction. Thank you for listening, Hannah. No, thank you. I'm sorry, but someone is waiting for me, so I have to go. After hanging up the phone, I looked at myself in the mirror. Working at the same place as my ex-husband wasn't an option, so I found a job at another learning center. Living alone required me to become a full-time employee, and this whole ordeal forced me to reflect on myself. Perhaps I was afraid of falling in love, the fear of suddenly losing someone important. I lost my parents in an accident, and from that day, my entire life changed. Maybe love is the same. Even if you love someone, you will have to part ways someday. Even if it's not your fault, you might suddenly be told goodbye. Or perhaps, during a date, they could say, "I'm going to the restroom," and never return due to a tragic accident. No matter how long you're together, people will inevitably part with those they cherish. No one lives forever. Having known that pain, suffering, and sadness since I was young, maybe I had become indifferent to love. I was scared of truly loving someone from the bottom of my heart. Maybe Chris had sensed those feelings within me. I have no intention of excusing Chris's infidelity, but if I had loved him deeply from the bottom of my heart, if I had desperately clung to him to make him notice me, even when he acted kindly but somewhat indifferent, that's just a fantasy. I stared at myself in the mirror. Have I changed at all since a year ago? I lightly adjusted my makeup and left the restroom. In front of the elevator, at the crowded shopping mall, families and couples were waiting. In that waiting area, a tall man smiled at me, and it felt as if the space around him brightened with light. I smiled back at him. Casually, I reached out and held his hand. He seemed a little surprised but didn't let go, and held mine firmly. That made me so happy, I couldn't help but smile. Now I take a step forward to find true happiness.
Get out of here with your child, you horrible woman! Brittany, my mother-in-law, screamed as she threw my belongings at me. I looked at my husband, Daniel, hoping he would help me, but he just looked away awkwardly. How dare you deceive my precious son? I haven't cheated. This child is definitely Daniel's. Shut up! You're saying that, but you're probably cheating with that part-time worker, Christopher. Those words made me furious. I was already irritated being accused of a cheating I didn't commit, and now she was suspecting me of being involved with Christopher too. I glared at Brittany. What? Do a DNA test. Sure, go ahead. At my words, Brittany gave a smug smile. Only an idiot would prepare evidence of her own affair. Brittany laughed as she said that. I vowed to prove to Brittany that I had never cheated. 2 weeks later, after confirming the test results, I sent them to the in-laws' house. A few hours later, she must have seen the results. In the short time I looked away, my smartphone had dozens of messages from Brittany. What did you do? My name is Miranda. I am a 27-year-old housewife. Miranda, Robert. Dinner is ready. Oh, thank you, as always. My parents were always gentle and I rarely saw them argue. My mother, Samantha, was always calm and made sure that my father, Robert, and I lived peacefully. I respected my mother for that, and my father never forgot to show his appreciation for her. Thanks to being raised by such parents, I rarely get angry. Of course, there are things I can't compromise on and things that frustrate me. But getting angry tires me out, and it's easier to give up than to get angry. Miranda, are you okay? You always give in to others. My mother would sometimes worry about me, but I believe I have my own opinions. I live by not compromising where I can't, and at a pace that is comfortable for me. Because of that. Miranda, you're really easygoing. My friend, Sarah, often said. I don't mind being thought of as easygoing. As long as I don't inconvenience others, there shouldn't be any problem. Besides, there are people who like me for being this way. I like you, Miranda, because you're gentle. Daniel said. I met him in college. We met at a dinner party organized by a mutual friend. I hate conflicts. I like someone like Miranda who is calm and doesn't argue. Daniel said at the dinner party. He didn't really want to attend the party but didn't want to offend his friend by declining. That's why he attended. You're considerate of your friends. That's wonderful. Thank you. Hey Miranda, if you're not seeing anyone right now, would you go out with me? And so, we started dating after his confession. He accepted that I had things I couldn't compromise on, and we had no major arguments and no problems while dating. Miranda, will you marry me? Yes, gladly. After a few years of dating, we got married. Thank you for marrying Daniel. He's really lucky to have you. His parents were gentle people too, Brittany, who is always smiling, and father-in-law, Joseph, who is calm-looking. I felt truly grateful that these two became part of our family at that moment. What, Joseph? Shortly after Daniel and I got married, Joseph was hospitalized. Apparently, he was involved in a car accident. Fortunately, his life wasn't in danger, but he broke his leg and had to stay in the hospital for a while. Well, I'm glad it wasn't serious. I'm sorry for worrying you. When Daniel and I went to visit, Joseph apologized, looking genuinely remorseful.
Really? When I heard about the accident, I thought I'd have a heart attack.
Brittany looked worried as she spoke. Actually, my in-laws run a restaurant. Basically, Brittany handles the front, and Joseph, along with a few part-time workers, handles the support. Joseph is good at paperwork, but Brittany, on the other hand.
I get headaches from staring at letters and numbers for too long.
She said it was hard for her. In such a situation, Joseph, who usually handles the back end, was hospitalized. Some of the tasks involve money, so they couldn't be left to part-time workers.
What are they going to do now?
I muttered involuntarily. Joseph's sudden hospitalization must be mentally tough already. With things like this, they might have to close the restaurant temporarily. I thought about this while heading home with Daniel.
Miranda, can I talk to you for a moment?
As I was relaxing at home, Daniel approached me, looking apologetic. From his expression, I had a hunch about what he wanted to say.
Can you quit your job and help out at my family's restaurant?
He pleaded. Daniel and I work at completely different companies.
Daniel, you know how important my job is to me, right?
Daniel averted his eyes from my question. I work at a company founded by Sarah. I've always dreamed of working in design, and I'm deeply passionate about my job. I've talked about this with Daniel many times, and he always supported me.
I understand. But I want you to help out until Dad recovers.
I felt conflicted by his words. So, I told Daniel I needed some time to think and put the decision on hold. Certainly, running the restaurant would be difficult in this situation. But honestly, if he's that worried, Daniel should help out himself.
Well, that would be impossible.
Daniel is as bad at paperwork as Brittany. Considering he doesn't do housework, he probably can't cook either. If Daniel tried to help at the restaurant, he'd just be in the way.
So, it's really up to me.
I muttered, deciding to consult with Sarah.
I see. I understand the difficulty of your in-laws and the pressure you feel as their daughter-in-law.
Exactly.
Also, I don't have a bad relationship with them and I do want to help.
That's why I need to ask you something. Sarah readily agreed to my request. Thanks to that, I decided to help out at the restaurant.
Daniel, about the restaurant.
I'll help out.
Really? Thank you.
Daniel was overjoyed at my decision, and when Brittany heard about it,
thank you.
She was happy too. Seeing their happiness made me determined to do my best. Just when I thought that,
if you're here, you're going to be useful.
Brittany's demeanor changed drastically. Originally, Brittany was supposed to cook while the part-time workers handled the front. And I was supposed to handle the back end, even though I was inexperienced. But Brittany started giving orders.
Hurry up and take the orders. If you have time to idle, clean up. Clean the plates and wash them.
Commanding me one after another. Gradually, it escalated, and eventually, she even started making me do simple cooking tasks. She wouldn't let me take any breaks, and as soon as I tried to sit down, she'd say, "Don't rest."
Miranda, I'll handle this. You go take a break over there.
That was Christopher, a college student and part-time worker leader. He always looked out for everyone and subtly helped out. But for me, who wasn't used to this, being treated roughly every day was exhausting.
If this keeps up, I'm going to collapse. Come on, just hang in there until Dad gets back. We'll manage somehow.
Even when I told Daniel how I was being treated, he just smiled awkwardly and said that Daniel wouldn't even listen to my complaints.
Sigh, maybe I made the wrong choice.
At first, I thought Daniel was a kind and peace-loving person. But in reality, he just didn't want to get involved in any trouble. That's why he didn't even try to mediate between Brittany and me. Seeing this side of Daniel made me sigh. I need to rest soon. Brittany told me to come early again tomorrow morning. I gave up talking to Daniel and decided to rest in my room.
Hurry up and get to work. Don't just stand around.
That day, while helping at the store from the morning, I felt sick and had to crouch down.
Ugh. I feel sick. Miranda, you don't look well. Are you okay?
Noticing my condition, Christopher offered to take me to the hospital.
Thank you, Christopher. It's no problem. Miranda, you always help out my sister.
Christopher said with a bright smile. Christopher is Sarah's younger brother. I was surprised to see him working part-time at the family store.
But really, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have been able to get to the hospital.
When I tried to go to the hospital, Brittany tried to stop me, complaining. Christopher stood up to her.
Are you seriously going to make a sick person work?
And thanks to him, I could go to the hospital.
Congratulations. What?
After the examination, it turned out I was pregnant. Apparently, I had been feeling sick because of morning sickness. I immediately contacted Daniel.
What? Pregnant? Is that true? Wait, pregnant?
Miranda is pregnant? Even though it was Daniel's call, I heard his parents' voices. Why can I hear Joseph's voice? When I asked, Daniel explained the situation a bit awkwardly. Apparently, Brittany, upset by my absence, called Daniel and they went to Joseph's place to complain.
But earlier, Dad scolded her, saying, she's working out of goodwill. What are you complaining about?
I see. Joseph had reprimanded Brittany.
Miranda quit her job to help us out of goodwill. Don't make her work when she's feeling sick.
Hearing that made me feel a bit relieved. Knowing that Joseph was on my side. It gave me some comfort.
Miranda, congratulations on your pregnancy.
Joseph then took over the phone. I'm sorry about my wife.
I've told them to pay you more.
It was then that I realized. I hadn't been receiving any salary. I had been so busy and overwhelmed that I completely forgot about my pay.
Miranda? You haven't been getting your paycheck, have you?
He must have guessed because I stayed silent. Joseph asked, his voice filled with anger. I've been getting it for her. Daniel hastily answered Joseph's question.
Why are you getting it? It's Miranda's paycheck, so it should go to her.
Joseph's voice was low and cold. Brittany was the one to respond. Well, Miranda is Daniel's wife, so it goes to Daniel as her husband.
Cut it out. She's an important daughter to her family. What on earth are you thinking?
Joseph scolded sharply. This was something I heard later, but Joseph, usually a mild-mannered man, becomes terrifyingly angry when common sense or manners are breached. Brittany was usually scared of Joseph and kept a friendly demeanor around him. However, with Joseph hospitalized and out of sight, Brittany went out of control this time.
You married quite a handful, didn't you?
Christopher, who had been silently listening by my side, said with a wry smile. I returned his smile with one of my own. I'm sorry for everything. Daniel came to apologize to me afterward. He must have been scolded by Joseph, told to protect Miranda. Daniel promised he would protect me from now on.
All right. I'll forgive you for now, but make sure you do protect me.
I still had feelings for Daniel, and I didn't want to take the father away from the child I was carrying. So I decided to give it some time. Sorry for the sudden trouble. I'll be staying here from today.
It's okay. You must have had a hard time. Take it easy.
Not long after that, I went back to my parents' house to give birth. I moved back early to avoid Brittany's presence.
Pregnancy isn't an illness, and you're not even in the last month. You can keep working as usual.
Brittany contacted me like this after I came back from the hospital. It seemed she hadn't reflected on Joseph's anger. I told Daniel about it.
I got it. I'll talk to Mom.
But he did nothing. So, using my morning sickness as an excuse, I decided to take refuge at my parents' house early. I also talked to Joseph, who cared about me.
I'm sorry for my family. Your decision isn't wrong, Miranda.
Joseph accepted my decision. My parents welcomed me kindly, so I felt at ease at home.
Well, if that's your decision, I won't oppose it. Just have a healthy baby.
Daniel was surprised I moved back so early but sent me off like that. Brittany was the only one who opposed until the end.
Going back home this early,
she complained. But after what happened with Joseph glaring at her, she couldn't stop me.
The store will manage with the part-time workers. That's right. Just focus on the baby.
Christopher and Sarah also reassured me, so I focused solely on my unborn child. This was probably the most peaceful and happy time for me. Sure, the morning sickness was tough, but my growing belly filled me with love. And a few months later, I gave birth to my adorable son, Kent.
Thank you for being born, Kent.
I couldn't get enough of how cute Kent was. My parents were also crazy about Kent, and Sarah and Christopher were overjoyed. But Daniel seemed different.
Daniel, you haven't come to see him even once. Is he really that busy with work? Yeah, it seems so.
He never came to see me while I was at my parents' house. And that continued even after our baby was born.
Hey, Daniel. Why haven't you come to see us?
If this goes on, he won't develop a sense of responsibility as a father. Thinking that, I contacted Daniel.
I'm really busy with work. I'm truly sorry.
Daniel replied to my words like that. I sighed at him. What on earth is he doing? I decided I had to confront him when I got home. After a while, I returned home with Kent.
Welcome back, Miranda. And I've missed you, Kent.
Daniel greeted us with a smile and looked lovingly at Kent. Seeing that, I felt a bit remorseful. He did genuinely seem to love Kent.
My work has settled down, so I'll be more hands-on from now on.
Thanks to those words, we were able to enjoy some peaceful days for a while. But then Kent developed a sudden rash, and we had to go to the hospital.
What? Really? Yes, that's correct. Kent's blood type is A.
When we visited the hospital, we also checked his blood type, and it turned out Kent is type A. Both Daniel and I are type O. So I was utterly shocked, having assumed Kent would also be type O. Of course, I hadn't been unfaithful. Daniel was my only romantic experience. You went to the hospital today, right? How did it go?
The rash is getting better, but...
What? Did something happen? Daniel looked at me with a puzzled expression. I told him about Kent's blood type. He seemed surprised.
Wow, I didn't know that could happen.
At that moment, that was all Daniel said. He didn't seem to suspect me, so I was relieved.
I heard about it.
The next day, Brittany stormed in, saying that. Apparently, Daniel told Brittany what I had shared with him immediately. Brittany, having heard the story, barged in, suspecting I was cheating.
Giving birth to a child from an affair, you despicable woman. No. Daniel is the only one for me.
As Brittany raged, I glared at Daniel, who had talked without my consent and let her into the house. Daniel stood behind Brittany, looking flustered. Kent, startled by Brittany's shouting, began to cry.
Be quiet! Stop it, please!
As Brittany tried to lash out, I quickly picked up Kent to protect him. Brittany glared at me, clutching my belongings.
Get out of here with your child, you horrible woman!
She shouted, throwing my belongings at me. I looked at Daniel for help, but he just looked away awkwardly.
How dare you deceive my precious son? I have never cheated. This child is definitely Daniel's. Shut up! You're probably having an affair with that part-time worker Christopher too.
Her words made me furious. It was infuriating enough to be falsely accused of cheating, but to have my relationship with Christopher questioned too? I glared at Brittany.
I'll do a DNA test.
Fine, go ahead. Brittany smirked at my words.
Preparing evidence of your own infidelity, what a foolish woman.
Brittany laughed. I vowed to prove I was not cheating. Returning to my parents' house, I explained the situation to them.
Being accused so one-sidedly. We believe in you, Miranda.
My parents trusted me. When I mentioned a DNA test, they even offered to cover the cost.
Oh.
What's wrong? At that moment, someone contacted me. This person had heard the story and offered their help.
If they're helping, that's reassuring. I'll definitely get back at Brittany.
My anger toward Brittany fueled my determination.
I will make her regret this.
2 weeks later, after confirming the test results, I sent them to my in-laws.
Let's see their reaction,
I murmured, heading to Kent. A few hours later, Brittany must have seen the results. While my attention was elsewhere, I received numerous messages from Brittany on my smartphone.
What have you done?
When I answered the phone, her screams were the first thing I heard.
I just proved what you asked for. Don't mess with me.
Brittany continued to hurl insults at me. This wasn't getting anywhere. I decided to leave Kent with my parents and confront my in-laws. I'll go too. I can't forgive anyone who hurts my friend.
I'm coming as well.
Sarah and Christopher joined me along the way. I had told Sarah beforehand and informed her of our plan to confront them. So, the three of us headed to my in-laws.
Excuse us. How dare you show your face here? Welcome, Miranda.
When I arrived at my in-laws' house, Brittany was glaring at me with anger in her eyes, while Joseph greeted me warmly, and Daniel cowered in the corner. What are you angry about?
I just proved my innocence. This is all wrong. You must have altered it.
Brittany lamented, clutching the test results tightly in her hand. The results clearly stated that Kent was Daniel's son.
Can't you accept that even after seeing it? This can't be true.
For what it's worth.
I never had the time or opportunity to cheat on you, given how roughly you treated me.
In reality, I had been called to Brittany's side from early morning until Daniel came home at night. Even at work, Brittany's watchful eyes were always on me, leaving no chance for an affair.
I was also suspected of being the lover, but between my part-time job and studies, I barely had time to meet anyone outside the store. If you want, you can check. I mostly spent my time with friends or family.
Christopher declared confidently. Brittany fell silent at his words. Then Christopher turned his gaze to Daniel, who was quietly observing.
Why are you silent, Daniel? Huh? You were the one who asked Miranda to work at the store, right? Yet you ignored your wife being mistreated and even told your mother to attack her on your behalf. That's pretty cowardly.
Daniel averted his eyes and murmured.
That's not true.
This was the perfect moment. I'll voice my grievances.
You never help with the housework despite seeing how exhausted I am every day.
You relax on the couch until I prepare meals, never bothering to clean or do the laundry, but always complaining about the mess. And when I tell you to do it yourself, you always say you have to get up early and run to the bedroom. And you never do anything when I talk to you about Brittany.
You tattled to Brittany about Kent just to avoid her anger, didn't you? You're a coward, just like Christopher said. But
Daniel looked away, searching for an excuse. This man isn't kind at all. He just wants to avoid trouble.
I only agreed to help at the store because you asked me to. But with the salary and everything, I've had enough of you. What? Please, I'm really sorry.
Daniel finally looked panicked and apologized. I just got confused about Kent's blood type.
About that blood type, there's someone else who can explain it.
Daniel and Brittany looked puzzled at my words.
I'll explain that.
The person who answered was Joseph, who had been watching with a smile. He spoke in an unnervingly low voice. Something clicked in Brittany's mind, and she turned pale.
What's wrong, Mom?
Daniel was confused by Brittany's reaction. Ignoring them, Joseph pulled out a piece of paper.
Is that a DNA test?
Whose?
Mine and yours. What?
Yes, the paper was for Daniel and Joseph, and it stated that there was no biological relationship between them. Daniel was speechless as he read it.
I'm not your son.
The truth was, Daniel was not Joseph's child, but the child of Brittany's affair partner. The man Brittany was having an affair with turned out he had blood type A, so does Daniel. Brittany's screaming about Kent's test results was probably just her desperate attempt to cover up her affair.
No way, that's impossible.
Daniel, unaware of these facts, had always assumed he was blood type O since both his parents were.
Well, I've always had my doubts. What?
Joseph had long suspected Brittany of cheating and questioned if Daniel was truly his son.
But by then, Daniel was already 10 years old, and I had raised him with love.
So, I chose not to uncover the truth. However, when Joseph heard about me, he got angry, realizing Brittany had no right to speak, and decided to reveal the truth. He then contacted me, saying, "I'll handle the investigation, but I want you to do the DNA tests for us."
Investigation? To find out what you've been spending Miranda's salary on.
At those words, Daniel's face turned pale.
You've been dumping the store and housework on Miranda while having affairs. It's remarkable how similar you are to your mother.
Just as Joseph had suspected, Daniel had been cheating and using my salary to spoil his mistress. The investigation revealed that his mistress didn't even know Daniel was married. In other words, he had been deceiving both of us.
You will pay for this.
At my words, Daniel collapsed into a chair, powerless.
You, too, will face the consequences of your infidelity, and I'm divorcing you. I'll also be quitting my part-time job.
Joseph added, following my lead. Christopher then declared his decision as well. Brittany looked bewildered, asking why.
If both Miranda and Joseph are getting divorced, the store can't survive. You only cook. You don't handle any of the bookkeeping or administrative work.
Lately, even the cooking had been left to me and the part-time workers. Regular customers had noticed this and mentioned they came to support Miranda, who was working hard in Joseph's place. As a result, with me gone, the number of customers had decreased. If Joseph and I didn't return to the store, the remaining regulars would likely stop coming too. The store, supported by regulars and Miranda, will surely go under.
Everyone has sensed this and has been quitting their part-time jobs one by one. No!
Brittany started to panic as Christopher spoke. The store had been run by Brittany's family for generations.
I can't let it end with me. You won't get a divorce or quit the store, will you? Even with your family's help, finding a job while raising children will be tough.
Realizing the situation, Daniel turned to me with a trembling voice. Just then, Sarah stepped in front of me. Unfortunately, she's my excellent employee. So, I'll be taking responsibility for hiring her back. Before I quit my job, I had consulted Sarah, who arranged for me to return to the company at any time. So, finding a new job wasn't a problem.
I will never forgive you for hurting my best friend,
Sarah told Daniel with a smile. After that, Daniel and I successfully got divorced. Daniel pleaded not to get divorced and to stay with me and Kent until the very end, but Sarah's husband, a lawyer, helped us.
I made sure your husband would pay properly.
As she promised, Daniel paid a hefty amount in alimony and child support. It was all paid in a lump sum, allowing me to live comfortably for a while. Joseph also agreed to divorce without any property division in exchange for not claiming any compensation.
Are you really okay with not asking for any compensation? Yeah, it's fine. I've got enough savings, and Brittany is already finished no matter what.
Originally, his parents had been running the same store, but they had kept their finances strictly separate. Thanks to that, Joseph had been able to save up, but Brittany had been spending recklessly and had no savings. As a result, the only thing left for Brittany was that store. That store will probably go under soon.
When that happens, Brittany will have no choice but to rely on Daniel,
Joseph said. And it became a reality. A while later, when I was talking with Sarah. By the way, what happened with Daniel and the others? Oh, they contacted me. So, I talked about what happened to Daniel and the others. That store couldn't be managed properly without us, and it soon went under. All the regular customers left, and it went under in no time. In the end, they had to take on a lot of debt. Brittany ended up selling the store and the land to pay off the debt, taking only the bare minimum and running to Daniel. But Daniel has it tough too. In fact, his affair partner was a new employee at the company Daniel worked with. That new employee claimed to have been deceived and cried to others, spreading the story quickly. The story reached Daniel's company, and his boss subtly suggested he resign, leading him to voluntarily retire. So, they sold their house to repay the debt for alimony and child support and moved into a cheap apartment. He was getting by with a part-time job, but then Brittany showed up saying she was struggling.
And then she asked you for help? After betraying her first? No way you'd help.
Exactly.
I refused immediately.
Brittany sent a detailed message about her current situation, but I ignored it without replying. Thanks to that, I can now live peacefully. On the other hand, I have been raising Kent smoothly with the help of my parents. My housewife mother actively takes care of him, allowing me to raise him with peace of mind.
I'm glad you're happy now. So, shall we talk about the future?
We were meeting today to talk about the future. Kent still needs a lot of care, so I plan to start working remotely once he grows up a bit.
I'm so glad Miranda is back. Your designs are popular and unique, something only you can create.
Sarah said such kind words to me. They have such high expectations for me. I decided to work hard once I returned to work. A few years later, when I started going back to work.
Hello, Miranda. How is Kent?
Hello. He's been energetic since morning. Christopher visited the office. He always looks out for us and is fond of Kent. He had graduated from college and was now working hard as a salesperson at the same company with Sarah and me.
Miranda. I've always liked you. Will you go out with me?
Christopher said, and I was surprised. As I stood there frozen in shock, He looked at me with serious eyes.
I will make both you and Kent happy,
Christopher said. But I was 5 years older than him. So, I couldn't answer right away and decided to put my reply on hold. Shortly after that,
Miranda. Huh? Daniel?
Daniel appeared before me. Startled by the sudden encounter, I couldn't escape in time, and Daniel approached me with a smile.
I've been looking for you. Hey, let's get back together. I can't take it anymore. No way. Who do you think would want to get back together with you?
I immediately rejected Daniel's words.
You too. You're making fun of me too.
Then, as if his anger exploded, Daniel raised his fist towards me. At that moment,
What do you think you're doing?
Christopher stepped in between us and pulled me close. He glared at Daniel.
Enough. Miranda doesn't need you anymore. Shut up. What do you know about Miranda? Miranda, you still need me, right?
No, I don't. I have Christopher now. My words made Daniel look hurt.
What the hell? So, you were cheating on me with Christopher all along?
Both Christopher and I showed an exasperated expression. I had already told him that neither Christopher nor I had the time to cheat. Unlike you, I haven't cheated. I'm not even dating Christopher yet.
Liar!
It's not a lie. I did confess recently, but I haven't received an answer yet. Although my feelings were already decided. As I thought this, I squeezed Christopher's hand that was holding me. Christopher looked a bit surprised and then smiled happily. There's no room for you here. Or do you want me to call the police? At my words, Daniel said.
Damn!
And left. It seemed he didn't want the police involved. About what you said earlier.
You'll make both Kent and me happy, right?
Christopher smiled and nodded at my words. And so, we started dating. After that, I asked Sarah's husband to get a restraining order against Daniel. Apparently, Daniel had gotten angry and kicked out Brittany because she was squandering his earnings and putting a strain on their life. But, feeling lonely by himself, he started looking for us. As for Brittany, she wandered without a place to go and eventually went missing.
I don't care anymore. Because now, I'm happy.
Miranda, it's time to go.
Yes, I'm coming.
Today is Kent's first day of school. Kent adores Christopher as his dad. And Christopher wholeheartedly reciprocates Kent's feelings. They look like a happy family from every angle. I'm really glad to have become part of this family. Thinking that, I headed towards them with a smile. Finally done. I never realized funerals could be this exhausting.
It's our son's funeral, for heaven's sake. Why would you say that?
I'm just stating the facts.
We're not the only ones here, you know.
Surely, I must be included in that.
In the first place, it's partly her fault that boy died.
Catherine, my mother-in-law, never looked kindly upon me since we got married. But blaming me even for David's death. Shouldn't we be grieving for David and reminiscing about him? The complaints towards me never cease. Edward, my father-in-law, tries to mediate, but Catherine remains unmoved.
If only you hadn't married her. My boy wouldn't have taken his own life. He should have been holding his child by now.
I clenched my fists as tightly as I could. Frustration and anger welled up inside me. Catherine had treated me with disdain until we left the funeral home. When I got home, I was so tired that I fell asleep. As if I forgot everything. And then the next morning.
Can you get the newspaper quickly?
Yes. Hurry up. I wished it was just a dream. As I was told, I went to check the mailbox. I found an envelope tucked in with the newspaper. An envelope? Who could it be from? I took it out and checked the sender, but there was no name. There was just one sentence. Make sure Mom doesn't notice. With that, I understood who it was for and who it was from. I hid the envelope in my pocket and went back inside. What were you doing? You're useless. She snatched the newspaper from my hand. I sneaked back to the bedroom and opened the envelope. Inside, written in familiar handwriting, was something shocking. When I finished reading it, I felt like I was going to explode with anger and fear. I struggled to control my trembling body and took a deep breath.
Just you wait and see.
I immediately began to take action. My name is Lavinia, and I am just an ordinary housewife. I met my husband David in college, and we quickly became close. Since we first met, David had a strong desire to leave his parents' house as soon as possible.
You don't have to rush so much, you know?
No, I can't stand being dependent on my parents any longer.
But we're still students.
That's why. We have so much time now, I want to do everything I can. On the other hand, I was fully prepared to rely on my parents while I was in college. Being in the same department and major, it was natural for us to start dating. When we were juniors, David finally put his plan into action.
It's going to get busy from now on. Can you help me?
Of course. What do you need me to do?
Thanks. First, let's.
David's plan was to start a company while still in school. He had told me his reasons before, but another reason was that he was set to join his father-in-law's company after graduation. He wanted to make his own future decisions. A month later, we successfully established the company.
It's just the beginning, but we've finally taken the first step. Thanks.
What are you talking about? It's too early for thanks. The hard part is yet to come.
True. I'll be counting on you.
Leave it to me. David, a few others, and I created a startup. The company aimed to run a media platform that provided various types of information. From entertainment like games and comics to life hacks, we covered a wide range of media. But David was particularly focused on a website that provided information about adoption. By the way, I've always wanted to ask, why did you start the adoption site?
My friend from high school was adopted. As I heard more about it, I became interested. Usually, the focus is on those who adopt, but the adoptees have their own thoughts too, right?
Now that you mention it, that's true.
So, I wanted to help.
David continued to run the site almost single-handedly. The company continued to do well, thanks to the wealth of information, accuracy, and above all, the humor David valued. It even got small mentions in magazines. But one day, just before graduation, you don't seem very cheerful today.
Yeah, actually, I told my parents about the company yesterday, and they got really angry.
Why?
I guess they wanted me to get a proper job. Especially Mom, she was really upset.
After that, David often had a gloomy look on his face. Sometimes, he couldn't sleep until morning and had to get sleeping pills from the doctor. Seeing David like this, I decided I would support him for the rest of my life. The day before graduation, David somehow managed to persuade his parents, and I saw a genuine smile on his face for the first time in a long while.
Finally, I'm free.
Now you can live just for yourself.
About that. Would you move in with me?
Yes, of course. We started living together, and both our work and private lives were fulfilling. That lifestyle continued for about 4 years, and then it was my birthday.
Happy birthday!
Thank you. It doesn't matter how many times you say it, it always makes me happy.
Hearing that makes me happy too. So,
David's face turned unusually serious as he pulled a small box from his pocket and placed it on the table. What's this?
I want you to marry me.
When David opened the box, there was a small, sparkling ring inside. Of course, I had made up my mind long before.
The pleasure is all mine.
He took my hand and slipped the ring on my finger. It fit perfectly. But there was one thing that caught my attention. Why is the box a little crooked?
Oh, I was trying to decide when to give it to you. I've been holding it in my pocket and it ended up like this.
He must have been that nervous. Hearing that made me love David even more. The only problem was introducing him to my parents.
Are you okay?
I'm fine. No, actually, I'm nervous.
I'm with you.
Yeah. We introduced David to my parents first, and they accepted him without any issues. And today, we were going to meet his parents. Since leaving the house, David had been a bit unsettled. What are you doing back here? This is my home, isn't it? Fine, coming quickly. Seeing their interaction, I started to worry if everything would be all right. When we were shown into the living room, Edward and an unfamiliar girl were sitting on the sofa.
Welcome back, David. Have a seat.
Catherine served coffee, but there wasn't any for me. Maybe I wasn't welcome.
To get straight to the point, I want to marry Lavinia.
I see. You're at that age now.
Marriage? I won't allow it.
Why not? Marrying a woman you don't know. Calm down. But David has made his decision. It's not for us to interfere. Finally, with Edward's persuasion, we were allowed to marry. Then, the girl sitting next to Edward spoke up.
Congratulations on your marriage, bro.
Thanks, Wilhelmina.
Lavinia, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. We believed we were going to lead a happy life together. However, it didn't last long. It was on the way home after the greetings.
So, you have a sister?
Yeah.
But you don't look much alike. I'm an only child, so I don't really understand. We don't look alike, huh?
You don't?
Sorry, it's nothing. Let's just get home quickly.
Yeah. I thought David looked a bit surprised in this moment. Later, our marriage certificate was accepted, and we became officially married. We were overjoyed, but our honeymoon phase ended after just 1 week.
Catherine, what are you doing here?
I have something important to discuss. I'm coming in.
Wait a minute.
Catherine barged in without waiting for an answer. She threw open the living room door with force.
Why are you here?
Isn't that a bit rude? So, what's the matter? Well, after you visited, Dad's health took a turn for the worse.
Dad?
Yes. Catherine said Edward had been having health issues for a while. Judging by David's expression, he hadn't known about this. Then Catherine dropped a bombshell. He was diagnosed with cancer.
What?
Dad wants to recuperate at home, but it's just me and Wilhelmina at the house. So you want us to move in? Yes, exactly. The creepy smile on Catherine's face gave me chills. It was clear David was torn. Even in college, he had a strong desire to leave home as soon as possible. But with Edward in this condition, it was understandable that he was conflicted. As David hesitated, she turned to me. What do you think?
Me?
I never expected her to ask me. I wasn't prepared at all. Well,
Don't tell me you're going to abandon us?
Of course not.
Then what? A normal person would answer immediately.
As Catherine berated me, David came to my defense. Don't blame Lavinia. We'll move in.
good. I'll let Dad know. See you.
Catherine left, looking satisfied. Once she was gone, David held his head in his hands. I'm sorry. This is all my fault. Don't apologize. It's not your fault, David. Just when things were looking up. Why does something always get in my way? What do you mean?
Whenever things are about to go well, something happens.
I'm here with you. Okay?
Yeah, you're right.
We quickly terminated the lease on the apartment we had rented for our newlywed life and prepared to move in with his family. From Catherine's attitude towards me, it was clear that the future would not be bright. And so, our cohabitation began.
Thank you for coming.
I'm looking forward to living here.
First, I need you to do something, Lavinia.
What is it? My back has been hurting lately. Could you clean the house? We hadn't even unpacked yet. Hurry up. Don't just stand there. From then on, I was at her beck and call. David helped too, but Catherine didn't seem to care at all. After a week of living together, I noticed something. This family revolved around Wilhelmina. Even though David was their blood relative, he often felt like an outsider. Edward and Wilhelmina both seemed somewhat weary of Catherine's antics. Have you figured out this household?
Yeah, I think I have. That's why I didn't want to come back here. So, what does Wilhelmina think about all this?
I don't know. We've lived as siblings, but I honestly can't tell what she's thinking.
Really?
Wilhelmina was always kind and friendly to me. As David said, it seemed like Wilhelmina was harboring some dark feelings. Meanwhile, I was tasked with taking care of Edward. And what was Catherine doing? Absolutely nothing. Edward is calling for you. Go to him quickly. Yes. I took a deep breath before entering the room. What do you need?
I need a little help with something.
As I approached Edward, he reached out and grabbed my butt.
What are you doing?
Don't be so upset. This is just family bonding.
Absolutely not.
Catherine had said Edward was weakened by cancer treatment. But he didn't seem weak at all. He grabbed my arm with surprising strength and tried to push me down.
Stop it.
Are you sure? If David finds out about this, it'll be a disaster. With that one sentence, I hesitated for a moment. Edward took advantage of my hesitation and tried to undress me. Realizing the danger, I pushed him away with all my strength. Just then, Catherine walked in.
What are you doing? Edward tried to push me down.
Catherine, you know I wouldn't do such a thing.
Please believe me.
I had asked the wrong person for help.
How could you go after your father-in-law when you have a husband? What kind of woman are you? No, I didn't. If you don't want David to find out, you'd better do as we say.
It was a trade-off. Even though it was Edward's fault, I didn't want David to know about this. All right. It wasn't until much later that I realized this was their plan all along. Edward didn't touch me directly after that, but the fear that he might was always there. I couldn't concentrate at work, and I started making mistakes. You seem tired lately. Are you okay? Yeah. Maybe you should take a break. But don't worry about work. It's not that. Is it Mom and Dad? I'll handle them. At David's suggestion, I left my job and became a housewife. Staying at home all the time was mentally and physically exhausting, but I didn't want to waste David's consideration. David told Catherine and Edward not to overburden me. Things got a little better, but the harassment didn't stop completely. If you're staying home, you should be more useful. More useful? Just follow my instructions. Catherine handed me a piece of paper. It was a list of things she wanted me to buy.
Today?
Of course. Hurry up if you don't want David to find out. I had no choice. The list included items from the local supermarket as well as a specific cake Catherine loved, which required a train ride to get.
Oh, and you'll be paying for it yourself, of course.
It was already past 12 p.m., and I had to hurry to be back before David returned home. All I could think about was not causing trouble. I didn't get back until 7 p.m. I bought everything.
Why did it take so long? Even a child could do this faster. Just get out of my sight.
I went to my room and lied on the bed. I wondered what I was doing with my life. As I stared at the ceiling, there was a knock on the door. I sat up and answered. The door opened slowly, and Wilhelmina stood there.
Wilhelmina, what's wrong?
I'm sorry.
What?
I should have been more careful. What are you talking about? About Dad and Mom. My heart nearly stopped.
Oh, you don't have to hide it. You knew?
I overheard them talking.
I see.
I'll protect you, Lavinia.
I can't let you do that, Wilhelmina.
Leave it to me. I've got a plan.
But David...
I was determined to keep this from David at all costs. Don't worry about that. With Wilhelmina aware of the situation, I felt less alone. I had been feeling isolated, but not anymore. Then Wilhelmina said something surprising when we were all together. I'm going to work at Bro's company.
What? You go to a good university. You could get a better job.
I've made my decision. Wilhelmina was set to graduate next year. She was so talented that she could easily get a job anywhere, just as Catherine said.
Why David's company? At least go to Dad's company.
Mom, it's decided. Wilhelmina wants this.
But...
Edward whispered something to Catherine.
All right,
maybe that's a good idea. She changed her mind suddenly. I wondered what Edward had said. And David, take care of Wilhelmina. Of course.
What kind of answer is that? Seriously.
After graduating from college, Wilhelmina joined David's company. Being naturally intelligent and talented, Wilhelmina quickly took on various responsibilities. Around this time, Edward started being unusually kind to me. Given what had happened before, it filled me with fear again. However, something surprising happened. Lavinia, I'm truly sorry for what I did.
An apology now doesn't change anything.
I know, but I'll talk to Mom and make sure it doesn't happen again. I'm really sorry. I couldn't believe what was happening in front of me. Edward even made a deep apology. I mean it.
Please stop. I still don't trust you. I'll need some time to see if things really change.
All right, I understand. Despite being so capable, Wilhelmina could have easily gotten a better job, just as Catherine said. But this peace was just the calm before the storm. Though the harassment stopped, David's behavior started to change.
You're working too much lately.
It's a crucial time right now.
Maybe, but this is too much.
I have to do everything I can now.
Even so.
David wouldn't stop. Wilhelmina and I talked about this strange situation.
What is David trying to achieve? I know he's focused on work, but...
I'm sorry, I don't know either.
But this can't go on.
Yeah, we need to do something about it. We continued to tell David to rest more. But he threw himself into his work as if trying to escape something. He also started increasing his intake of sleeping pills. I knew something had to be done, and then I got sad news from Dad. Mom had been in a car accident and passed away.
Please come home immediately. I understand.
I was worried about David, but I couldn't bring him in his current state. With all that's happened, please take care of David.
Yes, I'll take care of him.
So, I returned to my family home. Seeing Mom's cold body, all I could feel was a sense of disbelief. Had Mom done something wrong? Thanks for coming back.
Of course.
By the way, where's David? David is. I explained David's situation to Dad.
I see. I can't believe David.
I'm worried about him, but we need to properly send off Mom first. You're right. We quickly prepared for Mom's funeral. At times like these, people usually cry, but I couldn't shed a tear. When the funeral began, I felt more empty than sad. I couldn't accept the reality that Mom was gone. Before I knew it, the funeral was over. Are you all right? Yeah, but I still can't believe Mom is gone. Me neither. The house feels empty without her constant energy.
That's because you were always getting into trouble, and she was scolding you.
Was I?
Yes, you were.
That night, Dad and I reminisced about Mom until late. We must have fallen asleep on the sofa because the morning light was already coming in.
Did you sleep well?
Yes.
Lavinia, you should go back now.
What?
David is waiting for you. You should go to him.
But
it's okay. Mom would want you to.
All right, I'll go. As I stood up to prepare, my smartphone rang. Who's calling this early? It was Wilhelmina. Hello? Wilhelmina, is something wrong? It's Bro.
What happened to David?
He didn't wake up, so I went to his room. I left the house immediately and headed to the hospital. Lavinia. Wilhelmina ran towards me as soon as she saw me.
Wilhelmina.
She was crying heavily.
Where's David?
She pointed to where my in-laws were standing. I helped Wilhelmina sit on a nearby sofa and slowly approached them. I opened the door slowly and saw someone lying down. There were 2 police officers in the room. Are you his wife?
Yes. What happened to David?
There is a possibility of suicide.
Suicide? That can't be.
I walked on trembling legs. There lay David, looking as if he were merely sleeping. Reality suddenly hit me, and I collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. Wilhelmina came over, lifted me up, and led me out of the room. Why would David?
I don't know. I can't understand it either.
According to Wilhelmina, when David didn't get up at his usual time, she went to check on him and found him lying in bed, already gone. They called an ambulance, but it was too late. The police were called, and they suspected suicide. They found a lot of empty sleeping pill containers in the trash can. The family was questioned by the police, but they hadn't seen David since he went into his room.
This can't be. Sure, he was struggling, but he wouldn't leave us like this.
I know, right? I think the same. The autopsy confirmed that David had taken a large amount of sleeping pills, leading to his death. The pills were properly prescribed, and David had been seeing a doctor. Still grieving Mom's death, I now had to attend David's funeral. Just like with Mom, I couldn't cry. This time, though, the reason was different. I desperately wanted to know why this had happened. After the funeral, while resting in the lounge. Finally, it's over. Funerals are so exhausting.
It's our son's funeral. How can you say that?
I'm just stating a fact.
We're not the only ones here.
She probably meant me too. Anyway, it's partly this woman's fault that he died. How could it be my fault? I thought she had calmed down lately, but her core real attitude hadn't changed. Shouldn't she be mourning David's death and reflecting on his life? Yet, she kept criticizing me. Edward tried to calm her down, but it didn't work.
If he hadn't married you, he wouldn't have done this.
We could have had grandchildren by now. Wilhelmina, returning from the restroom, jumped into the fray.
That's impossible! Wilhelmina, do you have complaints about me too? Complaints? Of course I do. Do you know how badly you treated Bro? What are you saying, Wilhelmina? It's not Lavinia's fault. Bro died because of you too.
Wilhelmina stormed out.
What are you doing?
Go after her. You're useless even now. I clenched my fists as tightly as I could. Frustration and anger welled up inside me. Catherine continued to look down on me until we left the funeral home. Ignoring her, I chased after Wilhelmina and found her sitting on a bench in a nearby park. There you are, Wilhelmina. Let's go home and figure out what happened to David together. Okay. When we got home, I was so exhausted that I fell asleep immediately. As if I forget everything. And then the next morning.
Can you get the newspaper quickly?
Even though the funeral had just ended, there was no sign of grief. It felt like a normal morning. Yes. Hurry up. I could have refused, but my body moved out of habit. I wished it was just a dream. As instructed, I went to check the mailbox. I found an envelope tucked in with the newspaper. An envelope? Who could it be from? I took it out and checked the sender, but there was no name. There was just one sentence. Make sure Mom doesn't notice. With that, I understood who it was for and who it was from. I hid the envelope in my pocket and went back inside.
What were you doing?
You're useless. She snatched the newspaper from my hand. I sneaked back to the bedroom and opened the envelope. Inside, written in familiar handwriting, was something shocking. When I finished reading it, I felt like I was going to explode with anger and fear. I struggled to control my trembling body and took a deep breath.
Just you wait and see.
I immediately began to take action. I went straight to Wilhelmina's room. Lavinia, please come in. She had dark circles under her eyes and swollen lids, likely from crying all night. Sorry to bother you, but I need you to see something. I showed her the letter from David.
This is. Maybe he anticipated this outcome. So he planned to die from the start?
The letter began. By the time you read this, Lavinia, I might not be alive. I wanted to stay with you forever, but I couldn't bear it anymore. The letter contained even more shocking revelations. Apparently, Edward's company was struggling financially. He had suggested handing the company over to Wilhelmina. It seemed they intended to use Wilhelmina to secure funding.
If this is true, did I make things worse?
No, you didn't. They were reluctant at first. That's why they suddenly changed their minds.
What? Edward probably thought that if Wilhelmina joined David's company, it would solve their problems since she was family.
That's awful. Edward must have whispered this plan to Catherine when she reacted at that time.
I wanted to cause them trouble. I suspected Dad's company was struggling.
It's not your fault, Wilhelmina. You were trying to help me. But still. The letter ended with, I never told you, but I'm adopted. My position worsened after Wilhelmina was born. I'm sorry I kept it a secret. Please tell Wilhelmina that she was always my pride and joy. Even though I resented her birth at times, she was the sister I loved dearly. How much did you know about the adoption?
I didn't know anything. My parents never told me.
I started to remember our college days. The friend who was adopted was David himself. No wonder he knew so much about adoption. He probably wanted to prevent others from experiencing what he did. But now, the problem was what to do next. I felt so sorry for David. I needed to get back at his parents somehow. Then Wilhelmina remembered something.
How could I forget this? I'm so stupid.
What did you think of?
When I said I would protect you, Lavinia, I installed surveillance cameras in the house.
Surveillance cameras?
Yes, they're very small, so no one noticed.
Can we see the footage now?
Yes, we can.
The footage showed the two of them verbally abusing David in the living room. Calling him useless, saying they should never have adopted him. It went on for hours.
How did I not notice this?
As we checked more footage, we found damning evidence. I felt an anger I had never experienced before. Wilhelmina seemed to feel the same. We prepared and confronted the in-laws. Can we talk for a moment? What? I'm busy. It won't take long.
Did you two kill Bro?
What are you talking about?
That's enough. Stop joking around. You can't escape this.
You don't have any proof. The police said it was suicide.
That's right. Even if Wilhelmina is our daughter, this is unacceptable. How can you say that? Look at this.
Wilhelmina had prepared a laptop. It showed footage from the day David died.
You didn't notice, did you? Bro and I placed cameras all over the house.
What? I checked the camera footage as mentioned in the letter. It clearly showed them forcing David to take pills. Other footage showed them putting what seemed to be sleeping pills in his drinks, leaving him dazed and vulnerable.
How? We set up cameras. Dad!
Edward tried to stand up, but I stopped him.
Sorry, but it's too late to run. What?
We heard police sirens approaching. Give it up. The in-laws were taken away by the police. Of course, this isn't the end of everything. But I felt a little lighter inside. They were charged with murder using the camera footage as evidence. I shuddered to think what would have happened if Wilhelmina hadn't set up the cameras.
Are you okay, Wilhelmina?
I'm fine.
But your parents.
They're not parents. They're just criminals. As a result, Edward's company went bankrupt. It was already in a state where it could have collapsed at any moment, so it was just a matter of time. Both were found guilty and are now behind bars. I decided to visit them to see their faces. I also discovered that Edward's cancer was a lie. He made it up as an excuse to have us live with them. Fittingly, he was too ill to meet, but I was able to see Catherine. You look well.
What do you want?
Just checking in. How's prison?
What?
I hope you die easily here.
You're such a hateful woman.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Keep surviving as best you can. Goodbye.
I returned to the in-laws' house one last time. Wilhelmina and I prepared to move. I still can't believe David was adopted.
He's still my beloved Bro.
Yes, it doesn't change anything. We moved into a new place and lived together. I took over as president of David's company. Wilhelmina and I would carry David's legacy together until we could smile and reunite with him one day.
Get out with your $8 an hour part-time job. You're not fit to be married to a doctor's son. Divorce him right now.
My mother-in-law, Louise, pushed me, heavily pregnant, and demanded that I leave the house. Indeed, my part-time job paid around $7 an hour, the minimum wage in this area. However, I had a reason for choosing that job. Also, my husband Ryan is a respectable doctor. Still, Ryan chose to marry me. I can't agree with anything Louise says. Above all, I can't forgive her for putting my baby in danger. I am at my limit.
I've been waiting for those words. What?
She looked at me with a bewildered expression, as if she had seen something strange. Just then, Ryan entered the living room as if on cue. He froze, surprised by the unexpected words that came out of my mouth. It's no wonder he was surprised, since Louise's harassment towards me had always been hidden.
What do you mean? Are you really planning to leave?
Yes.
Because you told me to get out.
Don't worry, I'll explain everything later.
All right. I trust what you say.
Without asking for more details, he saw me off as I left the house. Behind him, Louise looked at me with a triumphant, sneering expression.
Thank you for everything. Take care.
I gave her a final smile. She will deeply regret her shallow actions. My name is Melissa. I'm 28 and currently working part-time. Until recently, I was a nurse, but I retired due to my marriage. My husband Ryan is a doctor, and we had a workplace romance that led to a shotgun wedding. We had always intended to marry each other, so we didn't mind the reversed order of events. Moreover, the in-laws didn't mind the shotgun wedding either.
Ryan finally got married. We were worried since he was still single in his mid-30s. You must have been too, right?
That's true. At the family meeting, I was nervous that my parents might oppose the marriage. Since he is a doctor, I expected a very strict family. Moreover, my father-in-law, Thomas, had a dignified face and was a taciturn type. He responded to Louise with few words, and his sharp eyes seemed to glare at me. However, I soon realized I was mistaken.
You were surprised to find we are just an ordinary family, right? Don't be nervous. Ryan is a doctor, but Thomas is just a regular office worker, and I'm a housewife. Having Ryan was like a fluke of nature. Right, Thomas?
That's right. Didn't I tell you not to worry? We're not a strict family, and we understand the shotgun wedding. Ryan laughed and lightly patted my back, and my nervousness flew away with that touch. Once my tension eased, I quickly became friendly with the in-laws.
So, Melissa doesn't have parents. Even though I don't have parents, my father passed away 2 years ago due to illness.
Haven't you met your mother?
I haven't met my mother. She wasn't around when I was young, so it's more accurate to say I don't remember her.
That must have been tough.
No, it's just that. My father ran a business, so we never had financial troubles. He was strict with money, and we didn't live extravagantly. I think he didn't want me to get used to luxury from a young age. Because of that, or maybe thanks to it, I've become quite frugal.
That's a good thing. What happened to your father's company?
Melissa, you're a nurse, right? When my father passed away from illness, he sold the company rights. So, I didn't inherit the business, just the money. Also, my father invested in real estate, so I inherited various properties. But I'm not like my father, so I didn't know what to do with buildings and condos, so I turned them all into cash.
So, you're wealthy.
Maybe. But I'm frugal, and with my father's teachings, I live only on the money I earn myself. Well, that's commendable.
I was unsure whether I should talk about money or not. However, as I talked with Louise, the conversation naturally led to it. It showed just how much I trusted Louise. But
was it okay to suddenly talk about a large sum of money?
I wondered as I spoke. Once the conversation paused, I looked at Louise's expression to see how she felt. The frozen pilaf I bought at the supermarket the other day was delicious.
Are you still eating frozen food all the time?
It's convenient and tasty, so I can't help it. They were already engrossed in another conversation with Ryan. It seemed they weren't very interested in money matters. I had followed the flow of the conversation to talk about my father and ended up discussing money, but it didn't seem to have left a bad impression. I felt relieved and sipped the warm coffee on the table to reset my feelings. By the way, Melissa, what are your plans for work? Are you going to continue as a nurse?
I want to focus on raising my child, so I'm thinking of quitting my job. Once things settle down a bit, I plan to work part-time. What do you think?
I think that's a good idea. I support it. Creating an environment where you can concentrate on raising your child is important. When Ryan decided to go to medical school, I quit my job and switched to part-time to support his studies. Did you do anything to support me?
I don't really remember anything. Besides, you quit your part-time job when I became a doctor.
That's because Ryan started contributing financially to the household.
Until he became a doctor, ordinary people like us supported him, and now that we're getting older, we want to take it easy. You're both only around 60, and Dad is still working.
What are you talking about? He enjoys working, so it's fine. Right, Thomas?
That's right.
Even regarding quitting my job, the in-laws responded positively. The conversation was progressing so smoothly it was almost frightening. However, the atmosphere started to shift gradually from this point.
You're 3 months pregnant now, right? It's going to be tough from here on. Ryan is busy with work, so he might not have many opportunities to support you, Melissa. I'll be fine. Despite how I look, I'm quite strong.
Even so. If something happens, I'd be worried. Oh, I know. Melissa, you should come to this house.
What? I don't mean permanently. Just until you have the baby and the child grows a bit. I can support you during that time. This way, Ryan won't have to rush out of this house, and you can take your time finding a new home. We plan to have the wedding after the baby is born, but it might be a good idea to postpone house hunting as well.
Right? We can't make a decision right here and now, so we'll think about it, Melissa and I. When the idea of living with the in-laws came up, I was startled. But Ryan decided to take the matter home to discuss it. I was relieved they weren't the kind of people who would force us into living together without consideration. If they were such people, I would have had to rethink the marriage itself. A few days later, Ryan and I discussed the matter of living together. Normally, we would consider giving birth near my family rather than at the in-laws' house. But I don't have a family home. Also, if it were just the two of us at home, I might end up burdening Ryan a lot. Ryan has a busy work schedule. Starting life together and suddenly having marital issues is a possibility. Most importantly, the in-laws are not bad people. After discussing it thoroughly with Ryan, we decided to live together temporarily.
Welcome, Melissa. Thank you for having me.
Come on in. Let me show you to your bedroom first. I had Ryan clean out his room, so you and your husband can use it.
Ryan told me. He said it was a real challenge just to throw things away because there was so much stuff. Well, he's been using that room for 34 years. Of course, things accumulated. He didn't have a reason to move out since he could commute to work from here, and being single, he just stayed in that one room. Ryan never cleaned up after himself, so I've always been the one tidying up and cleaning for him.
Louise said this with a tone of annoyance, but her expression seemed to be smiling. It seemed that Ryan was her pride and joy.
She must be very proud of him.
Her actions sometimes made this apparent. I suppose it's only natural to be proud if your son becomes a doctor. Entering the bedroom, I set down my bags and looked around the room. Seeing the two beds side by side made me realize that our cohabitation had truly begun. When I quit my job,
I wonder if this is really the right decision.
I felt a bit uneasy. However, with Louise treating me kindly, that unease disappeared. While many people struggle with mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflicts, I seemed fortunate with my in-laws. At least, that's what I thought, but the next day, Louise started to show her true colors. Ryan and Thomas were at work, so it was basically just Louise and me at home. I don't think you'll have any trouble with cleaning, laundry, or cooking, but each house has its own rules. This house has its own rules, so you'll need to learn them.
I understand.
Louise was right. Since I was staying at my in-laws' house, I needed to follow their house rules.
Next, do this. And this is how you do it.
She explained everything while I did the chores. None of the rules were particularly difficult. She just showed me where things were and what she did at certain times and in what order. Also, she said I didn't need to strictly follow those rules and could do things in a way that suited me best. It all seemed very peaceful. There didn't seem to be any issues. However, after finishing some chores, I realized something. The bathroom cleaning supplies and sponge are here. Call me when you're done. Louise just pointed out where the cleaning supplies were and briskly walked back to the living room. When I finished cleaning the bathroom and returned to the living room, she was watching a comedy show on TV and drinking coffee.
Louise, I finished cleaning the bathroom.
Okay. Next, go shopping. Here's the shopping list.
I wrote it today, but from tomorrow, you'll need to check what's needed yourself. Do you want to check the bathroom cleaning? Cleaning is fine as long as it's mostly done.
Did you do it so poorly that it needs checking?
No, not at all.
Good.
Then hurry up and go shopping. I'll expect lunch when you get back.
It seemed Louise wouldn't be coming with me to shop. Perhaps she had something else to do at home? As I prepared to go shopping, Louise, heave-ho, stood up from the sofa.
I guess she's coming with me to shop,
I thought, but then Louise headed to the kitchen. She quickly returned to the living room holding a bag of half-eaten cookies. I decided to go shopping alone. I don't feel like she is teaching me the house rules. I just feel like she's dumping all the chores on me. Since I'm being taken care of, I should at least help with the housework. In fact, it's something I ought to do. However, her attitude bothers me. Am I just being too sensitive? You were late. I'm hungry, so make lunch quickly. And come back 30 minutes earlier tomorrow. When I returned from shopping, she demanded lunch while the table was still cluttered with snack wrappers. I still can't shake off my annoyance with Louise's attitude. Even after lunch, Louise only gave me orders and left all the housework to me. At some point, she seemed too lazy to even get up and just sat on the couch, calling out loudly if she needed something.
Melissa! Yes, what is it?
Sorry, I missed the trash can with the tissue. Can you throw it away for me? I picked up the crumpled tissue next to the trash can and threw it away. The distance between Louise and the trash can was only a couple of steps. It seems she called me over just for this. Is this how it's going to be tonight as well? I was filled with anxiety, but it didn't turn out that way.
Melissa is such a hard worker. Don't you think Ryan is lucky to have her? Are you praising Melissa just to put me down?
When Ryan and Thomas came home, Louise returned to her usual cheerful and kind self. Was the Louise from lunchtime possessed by a bad spirit, or did she have another personality? I found myself staring at her in wonder. Then Louise looked back at me. Her smile was there, but her eyes weren't smiling.
I can't tell Ryan and Thomas.
I feel this unspoken pressure weighing down on me. Even though it's only the second day living together. I think she's bullying me. I can't just say. If I blurted out such a complaint right away, they might think.
Problems already on day 2? Can we really live as a family like this?
I think it's better to wait a bit before bringing this up. Maybe Louise is just not good at teaching. And she's genuinely trying to show me the house rules. I've decided to observe Louise's behavior for a while. On the third day living together, Louise not only dumped all the housework on me, but also launched a new attack. Melissa.
Why don't you get a part-time job? What?
Louise's words completely overturned my expectations, and I was stunned.
I quit my nursing job to focus on raising my child. You agreed with that decision, didn't you, Louise? I did, but you're not that far along yet, so you can still do some simple work, right? I was thinking of working part-time after the baby is born. Besides, who would hire me knowing I'd quit before giving birth? There are plenty of short-term part-time jobs. But what about the housework?
You can manage that while working, can't you? I tried to resist gently, but it was no use. It seemed like every time I replied, Louise's tone grew slightly more forceful, as if she thought I was talking back. It's only the third day living together. We still have a long time until we leave the in-laws' house, so I'd prefer not to clash with Louise. I could speed up my plan and consult Ryan. However, I think conflict would be unavoidable even if he intervened. So, I can't tell him yet either.
All right, I'll look for a short-term part-time job.
I decided to follow Louise's suggestion. Ryan was convinced when I said,
I think it would be good for me to work as a way to get some exercise.
And I also said,
I've been wanting to work if possible.
Initially, he was worried about my health and opposed the idea. I feel the same way. But if I don't start working, who knows what Louise might do next? I convinced Ryan and started a part-time job sorting products and putting stickers on them in a factory. The hourly wage is the minimum in this area, $7.25. The national average is around $15, so $7 is quite low. However, a low hourly wage isn't all bad. The workload isn't heavy, and the job is mostly done sitting down. Plus, the atmosphere is very homely, with everyone chatting as they work. This way, the job won't be too taxing or stressful, even during pregnancy. Also, by going to work part-time, I could spend less time with Louise, which gave me an idea for resolving this mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict. I thought about talking to Ryan about her eventually. But if I did, it would drag him into this conflict. Maybe I should just endure until I give birth and we move out. Once we leave the in-laws' house and get away from Louise, the dumped housework will stop. We might stay at the in-laws' house for up to a year. I can endure it for that long. Besides, as my belly grows bigger, surely Louise won't keep dumping housework on me. If I could just stay away from Louise, everything would be fine. I just needed to keep a reasonable distance from her. The problems would settle without causing any unnecessary waves. If things became unbearable, I would consult Ryan then. This was my plan. 3 months later.
Come on, let's go shopping.
Don't dawdle. Louise and I had started going shopping together. However, this didn't mean the problem was solved.
Okay, load the groceries into the car. What? We have a 25-pound bag of flour, cabbages, soy sauce, and quite a lot more. How am I supposed to handle all this?
You're young, you can manage. While I worried about my growing belly, I transferred the items from the cart to the car by myself. Even though it was just moving groceries, I felt more exhausted than usual. As I loaded the car, Louise sat in the passenger seat, fiddling with her smartphone and leisurely enjoying her coffee. I realized the fatigue wasn't because of the baby, but because of Louise.
Finally done? While you're dawdling like that, Ryan's out there working hard.
Now, go return the cart. As I pushed the cart back, I confirmed my suspicions about the cause of my exhaustion. It's been 3 months since we started living together, and Louise still made me do everything. In fact, since I've been feeling more burdened, things have actually gotten worse.
I need a break,
I had started to say. But
you're just using your pregnancy as an excuse, right? This is why people say today's young folks lack grit. If you put in some effort, most things can be managed. Keep working part-time. If you can't even handle that, it's like admitting you're weak. She seemed to have her own logic. If there was a way for pregnant women to move by sheer willpower, she should write a paper on it and present it at a conference for the benefit of pregnant women worldwide. I didn't know how to summon this special willpower, and I was nearing my limit of physical strain and patience. Moreover, lately, just because I was moving slower. You're dawdling. You're slacking off. You're too slow.
She'd say things like this more often. The mental stress from these remarks was actually worse than being overwhelmed by chores. The plan was to consult Ryan when I couldn't endure it anymore. However, after 3 months of Louise's behavior, I had a new worry. This wasn't a problem that could be solved by keeping a distance. At this rate, even when I'm due, load the 25-pound flour bag into the car, Louise would still say. Even if we left the in-laws' house, she would likely cause more trouble. And if I consulted Ryan, it might escalate Louise's behavior even more. This situation required a more thorough solution than I initially thought. I decided to hold off on consulting Ryan. 3 more months passed, and my belly had grown significantly. But the housework was still all on me. If I didn't start preparing dinner soon, it would cause more trouble. I knew this, but I felt so sluggish today and couldn't get off the sofa. So, I kept fiddling with my smartphone, waiting to muster the energy to move. Then Louise appeared. Unfortunately, my energy hadn't recovered yet.
Aren't you going to start dinner soon? I was just about to.
I really wanted a bit more time to gather my energy, but I forced myself off the sofa.
Just now, you say. Isn't that the typical excuse of someone who won't do it? You're just taking advantage of being pregnant, aren't you? And you quit your job too. The job was originally a 6-month contract. I didn't quit because I was slacking off. Making excuses itself is a sign of slacking off.
Yes, that's right. Which of us is really speaking? Due to my accumulated frustrations over the past 6 months, I accidentally muttered something I normally wouldn't say to Louise. This seemed to anger Louise.
What? That attitude!
Louise pushed my shoulder with one hand as I tried to stand up from the sofa. I thought I shouldn't fall and tried to land on the sofa as gently as possible to minimize the impact.
Hey! That was dangerous.
I did it because there's a sofa. Don't exaggerate. It's not an exaggeration. What if something happened to the baby? Moreover, it seemed like Louise switched on and began to reveal her true feelings, her face turning red.
We only allowed the marriage because it was a shotgun wedding, but I've never liked you. You might have some money from inheritance, but your current value is less than an hourly wage of $8 for part-time work. How can someone like that be a match for Dr. Ryan? Someone earning $7.25 an hour in a part-time job should leave. You aren't worthy of a doctor's son. Just get divorced already.
Hearing her true feelings, I felt a strange sense of understanding. To Louise, Dr. Ryan is a source of pride. She wanted to keep him close like a high-end handbag. Suggesting we live together wasn't for my sake, but to keep Ryan at home. We got married, and although having a baby kept Ryan at home for a while, he would eventually leave. Her irritation towards me shifted into an attempt to drive us to divorce. I couldn't help but laugh. This was perfect timing. I had been waiting for this moment.
I've been waiting for those words. What?
Louise looked at me with a puzzled expression. Just then, Ryan came into the living room, having just returned home. Ryan froze upon hearing the words coming out of Louise's mouth. His return wasn't a coincidence. I had been expecting it to some extent. While stuck on the sofa, I had been passing the time on my smartphone. Ryan had, "I think I'll be home early today," texted me. When I heard the front door open while talking to Louise, I thought,
this is perfect.
I wanted him to hear his mom's true nature. Louise hadn't noticed his return. Caught up in her excitement of harassing me. Walking past a frozen Ryan, I dashed out of the living room. I headed to the bedroom and started packing my things. Ryan followed me, footsteps loud and hurried.
What's going on? Are you really planning to leave?
Yes.
She told me to get out. Wait. What happened? Explain it to me. You can't just say you're leaving and expect me to be okay with it. Don't worry, I'll explain everything later. Right now, I just want to get out of this house as soon as possible. I understand. I'll trust your words.
Ryan, with a worried expression, didn't press for more details. If I explained everything to Ryan, he would surely shout at Louise. But that would only create more conflict at home and complicate the situation. Right now, I'm so grateful for his restraint. He saw me off at the front door as I left the house. Behind Ryan, Louise stood with a triumphant look, giving me a nasty smile.
Thank you for everything. Take care.
I gave Louise a final farewell with a smile. Seeing my smile, Louise made a puzzled face as if she saw something strange. 2 weeks after I left the in-laws' house, I had rented an apartment and started a new life. With the baby due soon, it was a time to try to calm my mind. Despite this, Louise called.
What the hell is going on?
As soon as I answered, she yelled at me. I knew what Louise was upset about, but I needed to confirm it just in case. What's the matter?
Ryan hasn't come home. When I was sending your stuff, it seems he packed his things too. He hasn't come back for a week. Do you know anything about this?
Yes. He's right next to me.
What?
I moved the smartphone away from my ear and put it on speaker mode on the table.
I'm living with Melissa. I just had her move out first to find a new place for us. He's really there? That woman ran away from home. Isn't this leading to a divorce? Melissa left the house, but she never said anything about divorcing me. I have no intention of divorcing her either. So, you're not getting a divorce. Well then, nice to meet you again, Melissa. I can't wait to see the grandchild.
I'll keep harassing you.
Don't think I won't do anything to your child.
That probably meant. Although it was a phone call, I could clearly imagine Louise's hateful face with that sneer. However, what Louise thought was her subtle pressure only I could understand. Ryan had already seen through.
You've been harassing her behind me and Dad's backs? I haven't done any such thing. That girl is just paranoid. If you say I was harassing her, show me the proof. Proof? I have it. I've recorded Louise's behavior on my smartphone. I can't play it now because we're on the phone, but if you want, I can send you the recordings later. Everything was caught, from dumping all the housework on Melissa to looking down on her.
For a last-ditch effort, Louise's plan was pretty good. Without proof, she could claim I was just being paranoid. But getting that proof was easy, so there was no way I wasn't prepared.
Ryan, that woman is only worth $7.25 an hour. Are you really going to stay married to someone like that?
You're a doctor. Realizing her plan of making me look paranoid wasn't working, Louise changed tactics. She seemed to be trying to stir his emotions. But that was a huge mistake.
So what if I'm a doctor? What does that have to do with anything? And besides, I'm not making an hourly wage of $7.25. I'm earning $10,000 a month. What? $10,000 a month? That means an annual income of $120,000? Don't get cocky just because you're in a slightly better situation. It's obvious you're lying. You've been home all the time except for your part-time job. And you're pregnant. How could you possibly make $10,000 a month in that condition? I'm not lying. I'm investing the money my father left me in mutual funds. I've got $3 million invested, and the return is about 5%. So, it's increasing by about $10,000 a month. $3 million? No, wait a minute. You said you didn't understand investments and liquidated the real estate. So how did you get into mutual funds? I didn't know what to do with $3 million. But that's why I went with mutual funds. There's someone who helped my father when he was alive, and I'm entrusting it to him. Why didn't you say that during the family meeting? Since you didn't mention the amount you inherited, I thought it was only tens of millions at most. That kind of money is nothing for Ryan to earn, and since it's money you inherited before marriage, it wouldn't be subject to division in a divorce. So I didn't care. Do you expect me to talk about having $3 million and getting over $10,000 a month in returns from mutual funds at a family meeting? How tacky would that be? Ugh.
It seemed she couldn't come up with a response to my argument. Louise was silent for a while, clearly thinking of her next move. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of excitement about what she might say next.
Melissa, I'm sorry for everything up until now. If you have that much money, you can definitely match up with Dr. Ryan. I understand, you deserve to be a doctor's wife.
Louise had always concocted her own theories, and now she was creating some sort of bizarre qualification. I didn't need such qualifications, and why did I need Louise's approval in the first place? Whether or not I was worthy of being a wife should be up to Ryan himself. Louise's sudden change in attitude had dampened my previously cheerful mood. It seemed she had no more cards to play.
I'm not coming home anymore. I'm not giving you any money either, so you'll have to fend for yourself from now on. After all I've done to raise you to become a doctor, you ungrateful child.
With those poisonous words, Louise hung up the phone on Ryan. I glanced at his face. He didn't seem at all shocked by Louise's words. Instead, he looked exasperated. Feeling somewhat relieved, I shared his sentiment. The next day, Louise called again.
What is going on?
Was my time looping? I checked the calendar and realized why Louise was upset. It wasn't a time loop. I called Ryan over and placed the smartphone on the table again. What's the matter?
Thomas said he's leaving home and started packing his things. Oh, today's the day he can move in. So, you two are involved in this, aren't you? That's an unfair accusation. I just showed Thomas the evidence of how you've been harassing me. What? He decided to leave home just because of that.
It was clear from her words that she wasn't aware of her own behavior. Thomas decided to divorce Louise after learning about her harassment towards me. However, my situation was just the trigger, not the sole reason for his decision. I had thought Thomas was a quiet type, but it seemed I was wrong. In reality, he was just too timid to express his own opinions. As a result, Thomas had been more or less under Louise's thumb.
When I got into med school, Dad asked you to keep working because of the tuition costs, right? Do you remember what you said? You said that once Ryan became a doctor, the money would come in later. So if we didn't have enough, we could just take out loans.
Louise's voice grew smaller and smaller, like a child caught in a lie, under his stern tone. It seemed Louise intended to corner us about Thomas, but his counterpunch had knocked her out. Louise had quit her job under the pretext of fully supporting Ryan's studies. But in reality, she had just quit to rely on his future income. Louise saw him as her pride and joy, but only in terms of his potential earnings. Moreover, during the family meetings, Ryan mentioned he didn't recall Louise doing anything special for him. All Ryan remembered was Louise lounging on the living room sofa, eating cookies while watching TV. Whenever there were issues at school,
Thomas is the one paying, so talk to him about it. I don't have any decision-making power,
she would say, passing everything to Thomas. In the end, Thomas had to struggle alone to prepare Ryan's tuition. Ryan heard about this from Thomas only after becoming a doctor. Feeling guilty for the hardship he caused Thomas, Ryan started contributing more money to the household. Because of Louise's attitude, Thomas had accumulated many grievances over the years, not just about Ryan's tuition or him becoming a doctor. When I began causing problems, Ryan moved out, and when we informed him that we would support him in the future, Thomas decided to divorce Louise.
Thomas is moving into the apartment next door. I offered for him to live with us, but he said, I can't interfere with your new marriage and the baby on the way. So, when we heard about the vacancy next door, we arranged it for him. The previous tenant moved out, the cleaning was done, and it's ready for him to move in today. That's why Dad started packing. You'll support Thomas's living but not mine? Thomas is still working, you know? I'm the one who needs support since I'm not working. I became a doctor thanks to Dad. I'm just paying him back. The money I gave to the household was always meant for Dad. Then repay me too. Just for eating cookies in the living room?
Shortly after we started living together, Louise would make me clean while she sat on the living room sofa eating cookies. The image of that scene vividly resurfaces. It seems Louise hasn't changed at all, now or then.
Wait!
Louise suddenly shouted, causing both Ryan and me to flinch.
I heard everything from Ryan. I'm sorry for everything. Please forgive me.
It seems Thomas was about to leave the house. Louise was pleading with Thomas over the phone. Ryan and I hung up the phone with exasperated expressions. Eventually, the in-laws divorced. Thomas moved into the apartment next to us, leaving Louise alone in the in-laws' house. Louise had the house and the money from the divorce settlement, so she wouldn't have immediate financial problems. However, because Ryan went to medical school, the in-laws didn't have a significant amount of savings. So, Louise had to work. But she had quit her job when Ryan entered medical school and had a gap of over 15 years. And she was turning 60 this year. With limited options, Louise started working as a cashier at a supermarket. She struggled with the unfamiliar register operations, working while getting complaints from the part-time students. Having relied on Ryan and Thomas for so long, she must have felt a significant burden. Now abandoned by us, she had to work to survive. No matter how tough the job got, Louise had no choice but to continue. Being alone also brought about significant anxiety about the future. She must be regretting her past actions now. At least this way, Louise wouldn't think of harming me or the baby. She wouldn't cling to Ryan or Thomas anymore either. Shortly after, I gave birth to a daughter. Our life as a family of 3 was about to begin.